This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. The iPad Air 4 has been out for around 6 months now, and I've been using it pretty much since day one. During that time, it's taken over as my day-to-day iPad. I've used it for everything from making an entire desk setup out of it, to playing copious amounts of games on it, to simply using it as my digital notepad. So I wanted to share with you how it's been holding up, and if I still think it's worth getting 6 months down the line. Oh, and if you're into aesthetic-y tech and iPad content, be sure to subscribe, there's lots of that on this channel. Okay, let's talk about performance first. It won't come as much of a surprise to know that the A14 chip in the iPad Air has kept it really quick. Seriously, if you're concerned about any speed or any performance issues at all, don't be. This is still as quick as the day I unwrapped it, and I expect it to stay that way for a good few years yet. I've had zero issues when running intensive tasks, complicated 4K video edits in LumaFusion for example, or detailed photo editing in Lightroom, and intensive gaming sessions in games like The Pathless have been no problem at all. It's not even hinted at any form of slowdown. The iPad Air really does rip through all of these tasks with no hassle at all. In fact, I've used the iPad Air as my main computer for an entire week's worth of work before, and it held up just fine apart from a few pain points that are intrinsically linked to using an iPad in general. I'll leave that in the video description if you want to see it, but I tackled a huge amount of creative tasks in that week, from podcasting to video editing to putting the entire video together on the iPad, so be sure to have a watch if that sounds interesting. I really do say this a lot, but most iPads nowadays feel like they have true headroom for years and feel more akin to buying a laptop rather than a phone. This isn't a device you're going to need to upgrade every 2 years, it should last you way longer than that. To give that some perspective, I still own my iPad Pro from 2018, and that's rocking the A12X chip, which is a couple years older now, and it still feels crazy quick. Nothing, even exporting long 4K videos on LumaFusion, has made it feel slow at all. I would happily use that device moving forward, even with the M1 iPad Pros coming out. It's still an overall fantastic experience. I think it is safe to say that what Apple have been doing with their silicon for the past couple of years now has been nothing short of amazing, and the iPad Air is going to be relevant with that A14 chip for years to come. So performance is good, but let's talk about how the battery life has held up. It is worth keeping in mind that with any battery life test, it really varies depending on how you use the iPad, so I can only talk from my personal experience with it. And again, you will be happy to know that it's just been great. An average day of use for my iPad really does change depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes the iPad serves as a counterpart to my Mac or PC, and sometimes it can take over as a main computer for the best part of a day. Generally speaking though, I've not managed to drain the battery life in a day. Ever. Not once. Even with more intensive tasks like 4K video editing and gaming, I usually end up with around 20 to 30% of the battery life left, and those really are the heavier days of use. Of course, if you're sitting down to do a really long, complex video edit that's going to take hours and hours, then you're gonna have to plug in, but that's probably kind of normal with any device. But if it's a day of lighter load usage like note-taking or social media or just watching YouTube, I usually end up with around 60% of more by the end of the day. In a similar vein to the performance on this iPad, if you were worried about battery life, don't be. I'm more than confident that the Air will easily last you a day without needing to be plugged in, even with heavy use. Before we carry on, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. As a freelance content creator, having a well-tailored online presence to get hired has been a fundamental part of my business. I've actually been a user of Squarespace for my own website for over 3 years now, and I can tell you firsthand that having your own corner of the internet to show off your best work is absolutely essential. Squarespace makes it super easy to make a professional looking website in a few clicks. There's fantastic templates on offer for all forms of creative portfolios, e-commerce stores, and many others too. All the templates are designed thoughtfully with responsiveness in mind, and making your own changes to them is super simple. They even take care of optimizing it for mobile too. Instagram, Facebook, and other social platforms aren't always enough to present your work on your own terms. Having a website is the perfect way to show off who you are and what you can do. So make sure you head over to squarespace.com and try it free for 14 days. Then when you're ready to launch, use the offer code BYTEREVIEW to get 10% off your first website or domain. And of course, a huge thank you goes out to the folks over at Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Okay, so jumping back to the overall design of the iPad Air, I think Apple did a really good job here of emulating the iPad Pro models while injecting a bit of fun back into the design with the color choices, which looks like it's something that's transitioning across all of their product lines at the moment. Overall, I think the design has held up really nicely in my opinion. I really grew to like the coloured sides of the iPad after feeling a little unsure about them initially, and since Touch ID made its way back onto the power button, it's become one of my favourite design implementations from an Apple product in years. With the inherent rise of mask use across the planet, fingerprint scanners have had a bit of a renaissance recently across all of our tech devices, and it's been a wonderful thing to have it on the iPad Air over the last 6 months. But I wouldn't hold your breath hoping it will come to iPhones or iPad Pros in the future. I might be wrong on this obviously, but I can't help but feel like this is a one-off, which is sad. The 10.9-inch screen has also held up nicely. Coming from the iPad Pro, I thought I would really notice the step down to a 60Hz panel, but honestly it faded into the background after a few hours of use, and I stopped noticing it entirely after a day or so. It's a great screen for everyday tasks, and it excels at things like photo and video editing too. Overall, the design of the Air is still a fantastic middle ground between the entry-level iPads and the Pro models, giving you access to those Pro accessories like the Magic Keyboard and the second generation pencil if you want it, while keeping the feeling of the product a lot more everyday and fun. One of the sticking points I found with the iPad Air still remains today though, and that's the pricing for the storage. And maybe that's a wider conversation for Apple products in general. I don't have a problem with the 64GB one coming in at £579. That's fine, but the jump to £729 for the 256GB version is a big jump, and it brings it within spitting distance of a brand new M1 iPad Pro, which is a mere £30 more and brings all those extra features of the Pro models, albeit with 128GB of storage. So whenever anyone asks me which one they should get, it's a tricky one to articulate because there's no real right or wrong answer. You'll just have to use your own discretion and pick up the one that's going to suit your needs more. I think it is worth mentioning though that you can pick up an external USB-C SSD for really good price points now, and they will plug directly into the iPad, so you're not completely stuck with the internal storage. But I obviously know it's not an ideal solution either. At the time of filming this video, we're still waiting for WWDC 2021, and there's loads of rumours swirling around about debating the possibility of iPadOS getting more pro-level apps like Final Cut and Logic Pro. Right now, we don't know if that's going to happen, and we also don't know if that will be tied to iPads with M1 chips. My gut feeling is whatever they release for the M1 iPads will also work on the A14 ones and probably on the lower end ones too, but I can't say for sure. So that's something that's going to be worth looking out for. And if you're watching this video after that event, then you already know what the differences are, if there are any at all, so be sure to check that out. This all boils down to one overall question though: is the iPad Air still worth getting in today's iPad landscape? And if you're looking at the 64GB entry-level model, then yes, totally. The Air brings some of the great features and accessories of the iPad Pros down to a smaller price point. It's an excellent iPad that will cover all forms of average to high-end use and still have enough power and headroom to stay relevant for years and years. However, if you're looking at the 256GB model and you're thinking about 4K video editing or really deeply getting into photography or any other creative endeavors, then you should really consider spending that tiny bit extra and moving to the 11-inch Pro. The M1 chip in those things will skyrocket in terms of performance. The 120Hz screen will be a wonderful addition to have, and other features like the enhanced speakers and slightly bigger screen make the overall experience of the iPad way better. So there you have it, that's the iPad Air 6 months later, a really fantastic iPad in general and a product I'm really fond of. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to join the 10% of others out there and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot more than you think it does, and it keeps me making videos like this one. Be sure to pop a like on the way out too, that would be massive, and I will see you all in the next one.